Hey, good evening, everybody from Sahuarita, Arizona. We are broadcasting live from Sahuarita. It is 106 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is really hot outside, but it's been hotter this week, believe it or not. We've seen some 110s. So far, we've had no rain in sight. They're talking about rain tomorrow. I think it is Thursday through maybe next Tuesday. A chance of rain every day. So we'll see. They've had a hard time predicting any rain this summer, and whatever they predicted hasn't come true. So at least not in our area. Had a good rain the other day in Green Valley, but it was as we got out of Green Valley coming into Sahuarita from the south, it just all dried up. So nothing up our way. Anyway, when we ended last week in the Sahuarita Tea Party breaking news program, I was talking about college football and kind of ranting and raving about college football, and that the Big Ten Conference and the Pac-12 Conference had both canceled their fall seasons. They only have one season, it's a fall season, so they canceled the season, period. Now they're talking about maybe a spring season. And then the caveat to that is that if their junior or senior football players want to go in the NFL draft, they're probably not going to play. So, it gets more complicated all the time. And some of the things I didn't talk about last week in college football is I think what people don't realize is this is going to cost the university, the athletic department, millions of dollars. Football programs at major universities, particularly the Big Five conferences, pay for everything. Okay. Now some of the sports make a little money. Maybe men's basketball in a particular school might break even or make some money. But generally, for the most part, college football, the program pays for all the other sports at the university, pays the scholarships, okay? And these athletic departments have to pay for themselves. What people don't realize is you have 85 players on scholarship on each football team, college football team. That's the limit, 85. Now, there are a few more walk-ons, they call them. They're invited to come join the team, and once in a while a walk-on makes through and earns a scholarship after a year, and the coach awards him one, and those scholarships are renewed yearly. Okay, they're not. You go to a college and you get a scholarship for 4 years. That's not the way it works. The athletic scholarship's good and renewed each year. Well, the athletic department pays the tuition for those scholarships. Okay. So if you have 85 players and 40 of them come from out of state, the athletic department is paying the out-of-state tuition for those 40 players. Okay, the other 45 are paying in-state tuition. So that's how it works. Very expensive. Okay, and these programs pull in, it's estimated, average $60 million a year, and excuse me. And again, they're paying for everything. So, you wouldn't have any other women's sports. You wouldn't have any women's sports at all. You wouldn't have any other men's sports. And this is a travesty. And these players, I'm convinced, and I very rarely agree with anything the University of Nebraska does, okay? I am a guy who I believe in what our fabulous coach of our national championship team and the winningest coach in Colorado football history, the Colorado Buffaloes, Bill McCartney said, okay, better dead than red, okay? And he said that every year. And his target was Nebraska, and when he got to beat Nebraska and passed them and exceeded all of our expectations, that was great. And so as a Colorado fan, the motto is we root for Colorado and anybody that's playing Nebraska. So I am not a Nebraska fan and never have been. My whole family is from Nebraska. My grandparents lived in Nebraska, got married in Wyoming, and moved down to Colorado Springs. And but my whole family's from Nebraska. I have relatives all over Nebraska, from Alliance all the way down across Ogallala and North Platte, etc. So, but I am not a fan of the University of Nebraska football team. Never have been, never will be. Okay, better dead than red. That says it all. But their coach came out this week, and I watched the interview, and he said they want to play football. Now, Nebraska's in the Big Ten now, so they're shut down. And he made a good argument. He said his players are safer with the pandemic going on. They're much safer being on campus as a team, going through team sports exercises, practice, football practice, everything that they do. They're safer there than they are running loose in the environment with their friends or out somewhere. And he's right. They are better off there. They can control them there. They can keep them away from those things and keep them away from other people. They can isolate them better. They can quarantine them better. So, and I agree with him. I think he's making a great point. But getting back to the cost of college football. Now, how much do you think a city, Boulder, Colorado, where the University of Colorado main campus is, okay? They call it University of Colorado Boulder, but it is the main campus. It is the University of Colorado. There's a medical campus in Denver, and there's another offshoot campus in Colorado Springs. And but the main campus is in Boulder, and that's where the football team plays. The stadium is on campus, probably the most beautiful stadium in the country. There's no better place to watch college football, and I'd argue with anybody about that. Okay, it is fabulous. Okay, and but that city on a weekend of college football pulls in millions of dollars from the fans coming to town and people traveling and the teams traveling and the fans of the visiting team traveling and staying in hotels. And I mean, it's a big deal. It's a big moneymaker for the city, and they're going to miss all that. And I don't know how this spring football thing is going to go over. You know, Colorado, the weather's pretty miserable in February and March. Matter of fact, the worst weather of the winter comes in February and March, not January. Okay, late January, then February and March, it is horrible. Okay, and snow, cold, bitter cold. So I don't know when they would think about even starting. They couldn't even possibly start playing games until late March, maybe the last week of March. And then they'd play through April and May, so that would be 9 weekends right there. So I don't know how they're going to do this. And if they have a spring season, they're saying. But the city of Boulder is going to miss out on me. And this is true all across the country. Nebraska plays in Lincoln. Everybody goes to stinking Lincoln to watch football there, and visiting teams go in there, and half the state of Nebraska runs in there, and you know they make millions of dollars. It's really important, and that's true across the spectrum of college football. All of these college towns, you know, they really rely on that income, millions of dollars. So I just want to mention those things because this decision is just a horrible decision by the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. And as far as I know, I checked the college football ESPN page today, and it looks like the Big Ten, the Big 12, which is, get this, the Big Ten, by the way, is 14 teams. So they call that the Big Ten. So they're you know, I don't know if they know what they're doing. And the Big 12 has 9 teams. So they're called the Big 12. So go figure, right? Pac-12 does have 12 teams, so they know how many teams they have in the conference. At least they're wary of that. But these other teams, they're not sure how many teams they have. But it's the Big 12 and the Big 10, and then the SEC is the other SEC and the ACC are the other Power 5 conferences. So, and the Southeastern Conference is on top of the world, and they are going to play football. It looks like they're going. They've been practicing for 2 weeks, so they're going. I see they've had a couple of teams. They're talking about some virus cases, but I think they'll just quarantine the players and keep them away for a while, and then they'll press on, right? They've got 85 players, so that's they've got several full squads. That's 11 guys, 11 players on a team, so you have 11 first-string defensive players and 11 first-string offensive players, and then you have 22 second-team players, 11 defense, 11 offense, and then you've got 22 players on the third team. So that's 66 players right there. So you've got probably 4 full teams of players, and maybe more. And then you have some special teams. Some kids only play on special teams. That'd be the kickoff team, the punt team, and the field goal teams. So it's kind of specialized now. When I first started watching college football in the 1950s, and I was a little boy following the University of Colorado, and it was really interesting then. Those kids played both ways. They played offense and defense, the same guys. Okay, one Colorado's All-American guard, offensive guard, Joe Romig, who turned out to be an astrophysicist, get that, working for NASA, smartest guy in the world, but he was a bruiser, and he played offensive guard and on offense, and then on defense he was a linebacker, and he was an All-American. So he's in the College Football Hall of Fame now. So we all Colorado fans revere Joe Romig. He's just an unbelievable person, unbelievable student, unbelievable football player. And he wasn't very big. He was 6 foot 200 pounds, but he was big enough to play in those days. This is the late 50s and early 60s, 58, 61, I think he played to see. 61 Big 8 champions. Great football team. Went down to the Orange Bowl and lost to LSU in the Orange Bowl. Had a couple punts blocked in the Orange Bowl, and that cost him the game. So anyway, years later, 1971, the Buffs went down to Baton Rouge, played in Death Valley, and beat LSU down there. So we got them back, and I don't think they've played since then. As a matter of fact, I know they haven't. So that would be a treat. I have to tell you, it is so much fun traveling to other towns and cities and other campuses and going to away games. That was one of the joys I got. I took my kids with me, and they had such a good time, and they met so many nice people. And some of the fans are really good, really nice. Some of them are horrible, but it was fun being there because you come to realize that everybody loves their college football team, okay? And they don't like yours. So you learn that. I mean, it seems intuitive, but it's really true. You love your team and you go with them, follow them. And I just love following the Buffs around the country. And we went to Iowa City and beat Iowa, and they were very highly ranked in 1988. Oh man, what a fun time we had! And it is so much fun sitting in a full stadium when you're beating the home team, and they think they're good, but they're not quite good enough, and they get so quiet. And especially the end of the game, it's just great. And we did that. We went up to UW, University of Washington, up in Seattle, 1989, and just beat them bad. I think it was 45-24. They thought they were pretty good, and we silenced that crowd pretty quick. And that was one of our undefeated seasons that year, 11-0. And the next year, the Buffs won the national championship. And we got to go to the Orange Bowl and watch them play Notre Dame. It was just terrific. So, it's big-time college football, and it's great. And I just have to say this is a huge mistake, canceling the fall season or the football season for the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. They're going to regret it, and I don't know if they'll ever make it up or what's going to happen. They're talking about loans now, getting loans from the conference. And, I just don't know. I'm just it's very frustrating, but at least the saving grace is we're going to get to watch the ACC, the SEC, and not so much the Big 12, because I'm not a fan watching Big 12 football. It's typically Oklahoma now, and nobody can beat Oklahoma usually, and they got killed by LSU last year in one of the 4 playoff games. So the Big 12 doesn't impress me, and none of the teams do. So anyway, that's where we're at, and I'm going to take a short break. And it is just after 5 o'clock, and I'm going to turn on Dan Bongino for you folks to listen to. So I'll be back in about 2 minutes. You stand by. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and I am going to play a short clip by Dan Bongino, starting it right now. So hold on here and let me get it started for you.
I've warned you repeatedly, and I've warned you, and not so much because I think you're on the right, the wrong side of right. You're on the right side of right. But because some of you work at companies, represent companies, and talk to people who own companies who are under the mistaken impression that catering to the rage mob and the blue check mark Twitter brigade of lunatic social justice warriors, that doing that is a good move for your business. I cannot emphasize to you in strong enough terms how a small pocket of what were relatively anonymous losers 10 and 15 years ago have managed through the use of social media platforms to make you believe that this small pocket of basement-dwelling losers, otherwise known as the social justice warrior outrage mob, they make you believe that they're a bigger presence in the market than they are. So you're a company, for example, whatever, Joey Bag of Donuts Inc. It doesn't really matter. You have a product. The product is, has a name they don't like or a photo they don't like, and they come after you and say, look, Joey Bag of Donuts Inc. is racist. It's not the people saying, and when I people, I mean the market. It is a small group of losers sitting in their basement roasting s'mores in a Snuggie. But because they're on Twitter and they talk to each other and other social media platforms, it makes you believe that a huge portion of your customers are offended by this product you sell with a photo that nobody cared about 5 minutes ago. Maybe it's a photo like Land O'Lakes of the Indian woman, sitting there with the Land O'Lakes. Remember that? Oh my gosh, we're all offended. Nobody cared about that for 50, 60 years, but now all of a sudden everybody's offended, right? So you're Joey Bag of Donuts, you're in your board, oh my gosh, you're in your boardroom, hair's on fire, everybody comes in, look what I saw on Twitter, this is crazy, they're coming after us, our customers are gonna boycott, we're not gonna have any Joey Bag of Donuts Inc. donuts left, we gotta stop, we gotta get rid of this tomorrow. No, you don't. Large swaths of America don't give a hoot about your packaging. They don't care about the name Redskins. They don't care about any of this stuff. It's all made up, fake outrage mob nonsense. Having said that, catering to the rage mob will cost you customers you thought would be cost by keeping your packaging that the little Snuggie Brigade told you was a bad idea. You don't believe me? Again, as I've told you 22,642 times, when you cater to the left-wing rage mob and you do what they want you to do, we're going to kneel, we're going to genuflect for the Black Lives Matter, pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. What happens? Well, look at this story in Breitbart. Again, Totally, completely unexpected by every sane, rational person in the United States. Warner Todd Houston, Breitbart. Story will be up in the show notes today. Please check it out, bongino.com/newsletter to access the newsletter/show notes, same thing. Ratings crash for NBA and Major League Baseball after protests-filled debuts. You know, someone close to me, I'm not going to say who, but shares my last name. Maybe one of my brothers. Maybe the older one. I'm not saying who it is, though. Called me this weekend, and we were talking about baseball, and poor guy brought up Major League Baseball and the Yankees, and I say poor guy because he didn't expect a, 5-minute me lacing into him about baseball. He was really just calling a chat. Yeah. Again, I'm not going to say who it is. He may share my last name and be my middle brother, and his first name may be James. But maybe could be another guy, too. So poor guy calls me, and I said to him, the point I was trying to make him about baseball and the kneelers now is you're catering to an audience that expects to be entertained, right? Joe, I'm not crazy, right? When you watch a movie or you watch sports, 99.99% of you, listen to me. I want to walk through this so everybody understands, especially the liberals who are having a tough time understanding why massive numbers of people are tuning out. 99.9% of people have no vested interest in that outcome at all. They don't have an ownership stake in the team. Most of them don't own season tickets. Most of them aren't trading on some equity stake they have in the team. Most of them don't have a kid playing in the team. What are there, 400-something Major League Baseball players? I don't know. The overwhelming number of people watching don't have a son or a daughter who's pitching in the game. It's not like your kid's Little League team where you're like, gosh, that's my son on the mound. Like, let's go, Bobby. You're watching for the sole purpose of being entertained. Was it Gladiator, Russell Crowe? Are you not entertained? Right? Drew will throw in a Gladiator. He always does. He texts me after the show. That's the purpose. You're there to be entertained. Folks, am I reading this wrong? If I am, email me. I'm happy. Send me a Parler post. Send me a Twitter post, Facebook. I'm happy to hear the alternative side is. But the sole purpose is to be entertained. How am I entertained? A guy, very seriously now, sarcasm aside, who loves this country. Loves, not likes. Not thinks it's cool, not thinks it's okay, not wants to pat it on the back, but loves with a passion this country. How am I entertained when you take a knee in total disrespect for our national anthem and you basically slap me in the face and give me the double-barrel middle finger? Oh, no. You listen to the liberals on social media, they say, stop saying that, Dan. They're not disrespecting the national anthem. No, they are. Because they're kneeling, which is always considered, when a national anthem has been played, a sign of disrespect. That's why we stand in unison and put our hands over our hearts, and we don't kneel. Kneeling is meant as a form of protest, to protest something. And you'll say, well, you guys, the liberals will respond, you guys are reading this all wrong. This is a social justice protest. Okay, protest, that's not how it started. Kaepernick, when he was very clear he was protesting the country, the guy who started this, the former dreadful 49ers quarterback. And what I find interesting is liberals are asking us to understand them. You need to understand what we're doing here, while making no effort whatsoever to understand us. How people who, like me, police officer, federal agent, but really just an American, how people like you, teachers, architects, military officers, military soldiers, enlisted folks out there who fought for this country for nothing, for no money, you're not getting rich off it, and who work to make this country a better place every day, who support Donald Trump and support conservative values. You make no effort to understand us at all. And you think that's entertaining to us?
You just heard Dan Bongino.
You do it every year, but it never gets old. Pack everyone in the car and head out to the beach. To stay in that familiar home with familiar faces. And make the new normal.
So, hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're back, and I want to let you know that we are live from Sahuarita, Arizona. That was Dan Bongino giving us a little information about turn our bumping music on here. There we go. Like that music. So anyway, Dan Bongino, he's a former New York police officer and a Secret Service agent. Actually worked for Obama for a while, as long as he was president. And I think that he also was an agent for Trump for a little while, but he may have retired just before then. I'm not sure. Anyway, that's Dan Bongino. He's passionate, loves the country. And he was spot on with that little segment about the NBA and Major League Baseball and the big companies, and he's right. You know, I don't know if you people are watching it. I haven't watched the NBA since Michael Jordan retired because I don't like it. It's not even basketball anymore. It's just dunking and shooting three-pointers, which isn't basketball. It's not team basketball. It's horrible. They don't play any defense. It's just terrible. And then you got Major League Baseball, who's playing games without any fans in the stands. I call it fake baseball because without fans in the stands, it's not really baseball. It's not, okay? It's not baseball. It's like practice games. Every night they got a practice game. So I don't know. They get to the end of the year, they expect somebody to actually be crowned a champion. Give me a break. I mean, I'm a Dodger fan from way back, from the Kirk Gibson days, 1988 World Championship. Classic home run. I was living out in LA at the time. Unbelievable. But now, you know, I keep up on the scores, but it doesn't mean anything. To me, it's like practice games. There's no fans in the stands. There's nothing. So, anyway, it's sad. And I doubt a lot of people are watching Major League Baseball. Maybe fans of those teams, but like Dan said, Dan Bongino, the average person wants to be entertained, and he's not being entertained with this nonsense. So, anyway, that's our spiel. Expecting to see Bobby Wilson coming on here anytime. It's 5:14, so I'm going to stand by here and wait for Bobby to come on, and we'll get started talking about the media and how they get away with treating some of our folks, particularly candidates, our office holders, and particularly President Trump. I mean, they write some lie about President Trump every day, and you know that. He calls them out fake news, you know. If it's not about him, it's about something that's going on or some other fake story. It's just unbelievable. So, and he calls them out, which we love. It's one of the things we love about President Trump. He calls them out. He lets them have it. So I want you to understand that the media was given carte blanche years ago by the courts, and Bobby's going to talk about that. Bobby got his law degree in Texas and practiced there for many years, and he actually was certified to practice in front of the Supreme Court, where he actually did a couple of times, and then he moved to Arizona and taught law, was certified to teach law in Arizona, and then retired from the law profession. So he'll tell you a little bit more about that, but we gave you a nice bio on the email we sent out that we were going to have the show tonight. So let's see. I've got somebody waiting in the room, and I'm going to admit them. And there is Mr. Bobby Wilson. Good evening, sir. How are you, Bob? Can you hear me? Let me unmute you, which I've just done. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. We're go.
All
You look good in your ball cap, and you look like you're ready to go. I just gave
I'm
you a
re-
little. You haven't got any logo on there. Are you rooting for any team or?
Well, I was going to put my Trump hat on, but I didn't know.
Oh yeah, that's fine. We're okay with that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. If you want to switch during the program,
All right.
we
All
don't
right.
care. We're
I'll,
very,
I'll call my assistant to get my Trump hat.
we're very casual here. So, but I see you got him in the background there anyway.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So how are you doing tonight?
Outstanding.
Good, good. Let me. I'm going to turn down my bumper music a little bit. I found this bumper music. It's kind of interesting. YouTube restricts, and you probably know about this. Maybe they restrict what kind of music you can play on your program.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, if it's copyrighted at all,
Oh, yeah, copyright. That's
they
right.
have software out there that catches you right away.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
immediately they send you an email and say you're using copyrighted music. Get rid of it. Finds it. So this music I use isn't copyrighted, and I just play it all the time. It
Oh,
works.
they got programs for everything now.
Oh
When I
yeah.
was,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
when I was teaching college, they had a program that we could run on our students' assignments to tell whether or not they plagiarized.
That's good.
Yeah, that we'd
Did they-
often hit a student with a question about their paper. Did you plagiarize this? Yeah.
That's good.
Nine times out of 10, they did.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's Joe Biden style, right?
Yes.
Yeah. He's a plagiarizer from way back.
Yeah.
In addition to being now he's just a loon and he can't. I bet you if you ask him today who his vice presidential running mate is, I bet he doesn't know.
He'd stop and think about it.
Anyway, I was telling the folks about where you got your degree. You practiced law in Texas. You were certified to practice in front of the Supreme Court, which you did a couple of times, and then you retired from law, came from Arizona, taught law, and but we're going to talk tonight, and Bobby's going to talk about why the media, and we'll say the media. I think we're talking probably newspapers, magazines, but probably focusing on newspapers. Why they can write untrue, and I'm being nice, untrue stories. Actually, they can write total lies about public figures and get away with it and not be held responsible for it. So go ahead, Bobby, talk a little bit about that.
Well, you hit the nail right on the head, Don, when you use the phrase public figures, because that's what everything turns on now. You have to go back and study a little U.S. constitutional law, and you learn back in 1787 when we ratified the Constitution of the United States, that basically all the citizens were treated equally in the Constitution, and if you were libeled or slandered, of course you could sue whoever did it, and if you were correct, then you could recover damages. And that was the law in all of the states. And under the 10th Amendment, everything that's left to the states is within their jurisdiction. And the federal government had no jurisdiction over libel or slander cases. And then a strange thing happened. It was called the Civil Rights Movement in the United States. And in 1964, when Martin Luther King was very, very active in the civil rights movement, and he was forming and setting up marches in the South, and in particular in Montgomery, Alabama, they put a full page ad in the New York Times, very critical of the Southern leaders. And by that, they didn't name the leaders, but they indicated that they were the chiefs of the public safety apparatus. In other words, police chiefs, police commissioners in the South that they said were abusing and violating the rights of the civil rights workers. And they put this in the New York Times, and they ran it all across the United States. Well, a great wave of litigation started in the South against the New York Times, and hundreds of libel and slander cases were filed against the New York Times by public officials who said they'd been slandered or libeled by this big newspaper article that the New York Times had carried. And these cases started working their way through the state courts. And the first one that got to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1964 was the case of New York Times versus Sullivan. Sullivan had been the public safety commissioner in Montgomery, Alabama. And even though he wasn't named by name in the advertisement in the New York Times, it indicated that whoever was in charge of public safety was violating the rights of the civil rights workers. And so he sued, and it went to a local court. The local court awarded $500,000 in damages against the New York Times. Well, that was a lot of money in 1964. And these types of lawsuits were going on all through the South against the New York Times and the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King for slander and libel. Well, his particular case, Commissioner Sullivan's case, was the first one that actually hit the U.S. Supreme Court in 1964. And the New York Times was in very, very poor financial shape at that time. In fact, they'd just gone through a major labor shutdown, and they were on borrowed time, and there was a lot of rumors that they were going to go bankrupt. And so they were scared to death of these lawsuits. In fact, someone actually calculated that there was $300 million in liable lawsuits making their way up the various court on the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And they all involved the New York Times. And so the justices on the the justices on the U.S. Supreme Court were faced with a dilemma that if they let those judgments stand, that would have been the end of the New York Times. It would have bankrupted them. And so, exercising a little activism, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that, by the way, if you're a public figure in the United States, you're no longer entitled to the civil rights of everybody else. You are going to be separated from the average citizen, and in order to collect money damages in a libel or a slander case, is you have to prove that the reporter or the newspaper or the media slandered or libeled you maliciously. Now, the court went on to describe what maliciously meant by basically saying you have to prove that the newspaper knew when they printed that article about you that it was false. So in other words, you got to prove what's in that editor or that publisher's mind,
Right.
And he went to press on it. Well, that is a tremendous burden of proof to put on a plaintiff. And basically, they ruled that if the court finds you're a public figure and you've got to prove malice, and you can't prove that those people knew they were lying when they put the matter in the media, then you can't recover any damages.
And that opened the floodgates.
And so all of those cases that were in the process were destroyed basically by that one ruling. And of course, Sullivan's case was reversed and dismissed. They didn't just send it back to the court for a retrial or instructions, which is what they usually do in an appeal. They just dismissed it and said, there's no malice proved in this case, and so forth and so on. Now, one of the best articles I've ever read about this, believe it or not, was printed last year in 2019 in the Arizona Law Review right here in Tucson, Arizona. A law student wrote a very, very detailed and very, very complete description of how that particular case, and I'm talking about New York Times versus Sullivan, I'm just going to call it the Sullivan case,
Right.
has created what we have today known as fake news. Because once the media found out that they could basically say and print and publish basically any comment or any statement they wanted to about a quote public official, then there was just no limits. And it's like we've seen with President Trump. And President Trump often says that, you know, he created the word fake news. Well, the fake news comes from a German word that the Nazis were using back in 1943, where they were putting out so much propaganda in their own local newspaper. And there's a German term for it, which translated means fake news. So anyway, what's happened is because of this case, the Sullivan case, we now have the national media, especially the newspapers and the TV stations and to some extent the radio station, can say anything they want to or print anything they want to about a public official and get away with it. I mean, it can be the most outlandish, most irresponsible thing in the world. And it doesn't even have to be true, but they can get by with it as long as that particular person is a public official.
Well, certainly, I'm sorry to interrupt. Certainly, President Trump is a public official, but you know, the bad thing about that is that, I mean, the ramifications are horrible because you know how many media outlets rely on the New York Times and the Washington Post for stories, right? So once they start the big lie, it gets propagated all around the country almost instantaneously, right?
Well, it is instantaneous. Once they come out by using these wire services and so forth, once they come out with something within a matter of minutes, it's already been transmitted to all the other newspapers and so forth.
Yeah.
And most of the big newspapers are owned by conglomerates. For example, the Arizona Republic in Phoenix is owned by a conglomerate that controls almost 200 major newspapers. And even our local newspaper here in Green Valley is owned by a company that owns 11 newspaper companies.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, everything is all big business now. And like you say, once they get hold of something, it's out there and it's instantaneous.
So who was I'm just curious, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in 1964?
Well, you got me there. Justice Brennan wrote the majority opinion.
Okay. And what was the vote? Do you know what the vote was? Was it
unanimous?
Unanimous. Well, that's not good.
That's not good.
That's not good.
But let me tell you how scary that decision is.
The second question, while you're thinking about this, second question is, who was the defense attorney for the New York Times? Or did they have
I have no idea.
It'd be fun to find out who that was. But go ahead, Bob.
What I was going to say, to give you a feel for the atmosphere, I think you have to take your mind and go back to 1964 when you had all of the civil rights movements so forth.
Yeah.
Much like what's happening today.
Yeah.
And what you see in the newspapers and TV every morning. Martin Luther King was sitting in the audience of the U.S. Supreme Court when they argued Sullivan versus New York Times to the court, if you can picture this. Justice Goldberg, who was one of the sitting justices on the Supreme Court, when they took an intermission, came out into the audience and asked Martin Luther King to autograph one of King's books. And then they went back and reconvened the court. So there's no question that the 9 justices on the Supreme Court at that time were heavily involved in helping the civil rights movement.
Yeah, well, they were biased. Yeah.
And and even Justice Brennan, when he retired from the court, he made the statement because he wrote the opinion, and
Right.
he said, I made a mistake. He said, I made a real bad mistake. He said, I should have never used that word malice when I wrote that opinion
Mm-hmm.
because he says, I put a burden now on a person that's been defamed. It's virtually impossible to surmount.
Yeah.
And even he regretted the terminology he had used. And
Well, I think about what was going on back in those days, and I was getting out of high school in 1964 and going into college, but the civil rights movement at the time, they were right. They were on the right side of the argument, and the bad thing is the people nowadays I call it civil unrest, the rioting and everything, they're wrong. They're, so,
yeah, yeah.
so between the two groups, back then, yeah, they were okay and they were right, and this bunch nowadays, they're out of their minds and they're wrong.
Well, there's an old saying in the law that hard facts make bad law.
Yeah.
And those were hard facts. I think everyone agrees that the civil rights movement corrected a lot of injustices
Oh,
in
yeah,
our
it did. Yeah. Well, actually, the
And-
pendulum swung too far to the other way.
yeah.
Because
And
we
I'm-
ended up with all the social programs of the Johnson administration, which
That's right.
tore apart the black families.
And what you can do if you're not careful, you can go too far in one direction.
Yeah.
And then, you got to remember the Supreme Court about 100 years earlier had ruled that slavery was legal.
Yep.
And that slaves were personal property.
Mm-hmm.
And, they made a horrible decision.
Yep.
And of course, it may have been one of the causes of the Civil War. And, they since corrected that, but they make mistakes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I fervently believe that New York Times versus Sullivan is a bad law case. And I'm not the only one that believes that.
Oh,
There
I'm
is
sure.
there's a lot of people out there in the legal business that are gathering their forces and gathering their money, and they're looking for the right case to get to the U.S. Supreme Court, because we've got two sitting justices right now, Judge Thomas and Judge Scalia, that have both gone public and said if the right case gets back to the U.S. Supreme Court,
They'll
that
reverse it.
they're going to revisit
Yeah.
Sullivan versus New York Times, and they feel like it's bad law.
Well, public figure or not, someone chooses to run for an office or whatever made them a public figure doesn't take away their civil rights. I mean, I don't know how they came up with that decision, right? We should all have equal civil rights.
Basically, what it means is this, Don. It means if you decide you want to run for public office, or you decide you want to serve as a public servant, and you are tagged with the public figure tag, then you are no longer equal to your neighbor.
Yeah, right.
And that's a violation, I think, of the 14th and 16th Amendment, of, equal rights and so forth. But, that's all going to have to be thrashed out. The problem of the courts now, and especially the U.S. Supreme Court, they have broadened the definition of a public figure to include just about anybody they want to include. Because if you're a movie star, or you're a baseball player, or you're a basketball player, or you're a sports announcer, or even yourself, for example, you have a show on YouTube, if you ever got in a libel suit, I can see them saying, well, he was out there with this program.
Yep.
So, he's probably a public figure.
Yeah.
And so he's going to have to prove that these people knew they were lying about him when they lied about him.
Yep.
And so they broaden that definition. It includes now just about anybody they wanted to include.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And if you're running for office, you're a public figure. If you're a police commissioner, if you're a sheriff, if you're a police chief, if you're probably a board, if you're on the board of supervisors,
Yeah.
and or if you get on a street corner and wave a flag and say God and freedom or something to that effect, you're probably setting yourself up to become a public figure
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
far as the law is concerned.
Oh, yeah,
And
I think so.
it started off with somebody that had to hold a public office,
Right.
and they have slowly but surely broadened it to the point now that it just about includes anybody that brings a libel suit is going to be a public figure by the time they're through with them.
Well, let's hope that our legal community can actually find the right case that you talked about and get back to the Supreme Court and revisit it and right the wrong, because that would be good.
I agree. And we've got a strong proponent out there that's backing the reversal of the Sullivan case, and that's President Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
President Trump in 2016 held a rally in Fort Worth, Texas, my old hometown.
Mm-hmm.
And he publicly stated that the New York Times versus Sullivan case was bad law, and that he was going to do everything he could to see that it was corrected. And he said, when I put somebody on the U.S. Supreme Court, I want to make sure that they understand that a public official has the same rights as anybody else, that we are not going to carve out a section of our citizens for second class treatment. And he's out there on that. And there are some very, very wealthy people in this country that feel the same way.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to spend their money to support attacking this Sullivan case.
So what if you were like the owner of one of the big casinos in Las Vegas? Would you be a public figure in that sense?
If your face is showing up in the public eye,
Which it probably has if you're a big casino owner.
that's pretty much what it is. If you're out there in the public eye,
Yeah.
then the courts are probably going to say, yeah, you're a public figure,
Yeah.
and yeah, you're going to have to prove malice. You're going to have to prove that editor or that publisher or that reporter knew they were printing a falsehood. And about the only way you can prove that is you got to find somebody, and there are cases where this has happened, where the reporter or the publisher who printed that statement made a statement to somebody else, one of his coworkers or a drinking buddy or just anybody, before it was published, saying, I'm going to publish this article, but I've got some real reservations about it.
Yeah.
And that
not
happened.
really true, right?
Yeah, and that happened in a major case that came out of Texas.
Now, go ahead.
And it was a judge, and this somebody, a newspaper editor, didn't like this judge at all, and had printed a story in the local newspaper that he was involved with some kind of illicit activity and so forth, and the judge sued him for libel. And this publisher made the mistake of telling one of his coworkers, who he fired later on, that I'm going to publish this story, but I haven't got anything to back it up. And they're supposed to use two sources before they publish anything.
Yeah.
The journalism business.
Yeah.
And of course, that can be two guys on the street that happen to have their own opinion.
The garbage man and the homeless guy in the corner, right? that's my two witnesses.
And there's always people out there that are willing to say whatever you want them to say for a few dollars.
Sure.
Let me tell you.
Oh, of course. So on the other side of the coin, you and I talked about this a few days ago. We were talking about the student that that sued, the one back in D.C. that got slammed by the Washington Post and the New York Times, I think.
Yes,
And
a young man, a teenager, I think, 18 or 19 years old, and he was not a public figure.
right,
Now,
he
that's
was,
about when you're a teenager or still in school,
yeah.
that's about the only time in your life you're not going to be a public
Yeah,
figure.
and standing on the steps of the Capitol or the steps of one of the monuments doesn't qualify you as a public figure.
And even though when it first went to trial, I don't know if you knew this, the judge dismissed it. He said, no, there's no lawsuit here, you know. Well, it went up on appeal, and this young man was very fortunate. He had one of the best law firms in the country representing.
Yeah,
And they got it reversed on appeal, brought it back down, got it ready to go to trial, and boy, those newspapers started rolling over and bringing their checkbooks, and everything got settled really fast. And the reason they could prevail in this case is because they could not prove this kid was a public figure.
yeah. So did he actually get some money, or did his school get some money, or how did that work? Do you know?
I'm sure he did. You know what they make you sign when you settle when mostly they're insurance companies. They make
Yeah.
you sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, because they don't want the public to know how much they had to pay.
Yeah,
And you know, so if they pay whatever, you know,
Yeah.
a million or 500,000 or
Right.
whatever,
and they don't have to admit guilt either.
that's right. And what they do, they say, okay, we'll pay you X amount of dollars, but you have to swear to us on this document that you'll never tell anybody how
Right.
much we paid you, and we're not going to admit any kind of liability. And you see this a lot with these cases involving men and women having affairs and so forth.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, yeah,
And-
there's always non-disclosure involved. Well, that's really fascinating, Bobby. We appreciate you coming on and talking about it because, I mean, we're all sitting here every day witnessing the media slandering and going after President Trump. And I don't want to say 100% of their stories are incorrect, but there are many, 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 many of them. The greater amount of them are just not true, and either about policy or somebody leaking out of the White House, or I have an unnamed source, right? I love those, and I know President Trump loves those too, the unnamed sources, right?
Unnamed source.
that don't even have the correct story right, and the golden rule of journalism, right? You have to have two sources.
Two sources.
You know they don't care about that anymore.
No,
They could care less.
That's just lip service.
Yeah, that's right. So
And
anyway,
hopefully your listeners will now have a better feel for how these media giants get away with all this.
oh
stuff.
yeah, no, that's great. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about it, and please say hi to Eileen, and you come back on down the road. You know, if we get some other law stuff we want to talk about, we'll have you back on the program.
Okay. Well, I'm following this litigation very closely, as you
Good.
well know,
Good.
and I will be glad to keep you up to date on it.
Yeah, good. So anyway, you have a good evening, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Don.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, there we go. That was that was a good interview. Thanks so much to Bobby Wilson for coming on. We appreciate that, and we hope that you all learned something. It can be challenging this day and age. Once they deem you a public figure, you know you're going to be marked for life, right? And President Trump, of course, being the president of the United States, he is a public figure. He's out there every day. But hey, did you all see the rally in Yuma yesterday? Wasn't that great? It was terrific. And 115, 16, 120 degrees. I mean, that area right there in this summer, it's just brutal. And it's brutal here right now, but down there, their little town down there near Yuma, El Centro, it's like walking into an oven down there. Patty and I drove through there one year and one summer, and there were people driving around with their windows down. I guess that was cooling them off. I don't know. It had to be 120, and it was horrible. So anyway, President Trump looked fresh as a daisy. He's up there talking, and it was great, and it was good to see the Arizona leadership contingent there. I don't know if you saw Jeff DeWitt. He was there, former Arizona treasurer. President Trump mentioned him, and Paul Gosar was there. Andy Biggs was there. Debbie Lesko was there. So was Kelly Ward, the Arizona GOP chairman. So that was great. And I think McSally and Ducey were also there, Governor Ducey. So anyway, it was really good. We put it on the, as the webmaster, I put it on the Republican website under the president page, and come up on the front page if you go look at the website. So anyway, so what's going on down the road? We've got a couple things coming up. August 28th, a Nogales businessman named Jaime Chamberlain, who owns Chamberlain Distributing in Nogales, fruits and vegetable marketing all over the country, and he's going to come up to the club, the Green Valley headquarters, and talk about Nogales and the border and the economy and the businesses down there. So that'll be really interesting. And he belongs to several of the things like the Nogales Port of Entry and some other organizations down there. He's either chairman, secretary of several of them. So Jaime's, I call him a friend, and he's coming up to speak, so that's great. And then on September 18th, we're working to put together a bus trip for the candidates. This would be the candidates like Senator of the United States, Martha McSally's welcome to come, and all the corporate commission candidates, CD2 and CD3 candidates, Brandon Martin and Daniel Wood, they're welcome to come. The LD2 candidates, Deborah McEwen running for the House, and Mark Workman running for the Senate, they're welcome to come. So, and some of the county people, we're going to go down from Sahuarita to the Green Valley headquarters, and then on to Rio Rico, Nogales, Patagonia, Sonoita, back over to Corona de Tucson Vale, and then back to Sahuarita. So it's an all-day bus trip on a big old 56-passenger Volvo bus. So it ought to be a lot of fun, and quite an experience for the candidates to meet all those folks. And so we've got to rally. We've got to rally everybody to fill the bus, and we got to rally everybody to meet the bus on the tour. So, and then coming up on September 26th, we hope to have a lot of people down here for the Republican Roundup, which is always a lot of fun. Very casual and a fun evening. 5 to 8 o'clock, September 26th, in Amato at the this year at the Longhorn Grill and Saloon. So nice place, nice place down there. Greg is the owner, and we met him, and he's really a good guy, and he's gonna make things gonna make a good meal for you folks. You get a dinner and everything for $35. A lot of entertainment. We also invited Ken Bennett. You heard us invite him on this show a few weeks ago. So, it should be a lot of fun. So those things are coming up. And that's about it for tonight. I'm going to sign off. And we hope to have another program next week. So we'll line something up and see if we can line up a good guest to talk about some relevant issue. And we hope you all stay safe. God bless you. And we will see you next week. Good night.